Oh,
Well, good morning to you, my friends. Happy Thursday. Welcome to Spiritual Matters Thursday with Dr. Monikah Ogando. I'm excited to be here. Happy to see those happy faces. Even though if you're in Atlanta, it's cloudy and rainy and cold and gloomy, and Tara's over there sipping on some hot beverage. Hopefully a hot adult beverage. Well, it's an adult beverage because an adult is drinking it, honey. That's all I can say about that. But I wanted to, make a big deal out of welcoming you guys because I feel like I have to compensate. I have to compensate for being in the middle of winter and still having a sunny disposition and and all of that good stuff, especially in single digit mornings. Lord haveth thy mercy. So we are going to talk today about, is it true, or I should say, can we depend on our channeled texts, authentic wisdom? Is that something that we can actually rely on? Is that something that we can really count on as authentic wisdom? We'll talk about it today. Welcome to the Daily Huddle. Yes, yes. Welcome once again to the Daily Huddle. Our channeled texts, authentic wisdom. Let's talk about it. I am a huge proponent about auditing your assumptions. And one of the things that, in order for us to be able to answer that question fairly, uh, I will say it depends. What does it depend on? Because that sounds like a escape route. It sounds like lawyer talk, right? Well, what does it depend on? It depends on how much you know of previous wisdom texts, because a lot of times your limited conversation about it will display some unconscious bias. If all you have ever been exposed to is one particular culture or one particular dogma, then it'll be very difficult for you. You don't have enough perspective for you to know whether that something displays authentic wisdom or not. You just don't. Sorry, don't mean to be rude. It's a little bit like somebody who only speaks one language trying to check you about the orthography or the syntax or whatever, or the etymology of certain words, right? I just had this conversation with someone a few days ago. I was like, one thing that you and I have in common is that we are both speaking English to you because that's the only language you speak. You're speaking English because that's the only language you speak. I'm speaking English to you because that's the only language you speak, right? And so you want to be conscious of your own limitations. One of the things that I learned about this when I was taking like physical science classes in high school and in college is that when we were writing papers or when we were presenting an experiment, we had to tell what our constraints were in that particular experiment. We had to say we didn't have access to this data, we didn't have access to that data, and that influences our findings. Same thing with when I did grad work, when I did my PhDs. And so you have to be aware of your own limitations. If you're not aware of your own limitations, that is an intellectual handicap. That's not confidence. That's an intellectual handicap. And so I wanted to get that said first, because then what I'm going to say next makes sense. Uh, in the common lexicon of our culture that has been predominantly Western, predominantly patriarchal, and predominantly driven by capitalism, we don't give much weight to things that are driven by feminine wisdom or intuition or traditions that are communal. Sometimes, and you've heard this even in the ways in which we talk about ancient cultures, like, oh, how do they even make money? I mean, they're not even interested. Who sells the Louisiana land for $24? as though you got over on somebody because you were able to pay less for something that was so valuable, right? And that just comes from the place of we have different values, right? For one particular culture, I'm not selling you land. Nobody owns land. What I'm selling you is the right to be able to take care of it, right? Like passing fiduciary rights, not ownership. Whereas for somebody else, it's ownership, and I'm able to just use it, leverage it, pillage it however I want because of my ownership rights. Those are different values. And so it's like, even though we're talking about the same thing, we're not talking about it in the same way. When you have, I wonder if you've had this experience for yourself, when you have had a gut feeling about something, when you have had an intuition or I like to call them a download about something, sometimes have you spent like more time justifying the gut instinct to yourself than actually just going with it? Like you doubt yourself and you check yourself and like, well, let me ask this person, let me check with that person. It's your download, right? And so in this culture, we don't celebrate and we don't cultivate the idea that you do have access to wisdom that nobody else has, or that they have it in a different way, might display in a different way. And we understand differences in personality and communication skills and predilections, et cetera, in all manner of other observable behavior. So why wouldn't we also have differences in the ways in which we receive intuition, inspiration, et cetera, right? And so I say all that to say that the way that you can check for yourself whether a channeled text is wisdom for you is if you have exposed yourself to that culture or that way of thinking and it resonates, right? So it's wisdom for you in that way. There's a second way that sometimes we don't consider in which channel texts are also wisdom for you. And that is in the way it doesn't resonate. Your resistance is also a portal to wisdom. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Because a lot of times when you hear something and you're like, nah, that's just baloney. Now we get curious about, well, what is it about? What are you actually saying no to? Let's explore that. Let's explore where the resistance is. Because even if you don't take something at face value, even if you don't give it credence or believe in it or whatever the case may be, it's a teachable moment to explore your own reaction to it, right? When if somebody were to say, hey, I'm going to take you shopping and I'm going to buy you a whole new wardrobe and it's going to be all size 3T. Do you know what 3T is? Is a size 3 for toddlers, right? No, thank you. And there's nothing in me that would be mad about it, disappointed, rolling my eyes. I'd be like, bless her heart. She don't know that I'm not a size 3T, but okay, I appreciate the offer. Bye now, right? There's nothing in you that would be like mad or resistant. It would just be a no. And why are we still talking about it, right? If somebody offers me a cigarette, I don't smoke. I don't have a judgment on people who smoke. It's just not my thing. You go ahead and smoke your shit up. Don't invite me to it, right? Same thing with drugs. Also, don't drink alcohol. I don't mind a glass of wine every now and then in my house. That's my own. That's my own boundary or my own predilection or whatever. But I don't drink like that in public. Again, no judgment. But the level of like okayness that you have with a particular text, channeled or otherwise, um, is a telltale sign when something doesn't resonate and you're not resistant to it, it's not for you, right? If you don't resonate, but you're also not resistant, it's not for you. But if it doesn't resonate and you're mad about it and you're arguing and you're like up and down and let me tell you why and other things it's wrong and I want you to see how right I am and well, that there might be, if for nothing else, if not for the content of the wisdom, then at least for what it evokes in you, that's part of its teaching. Yeah. And I wonder, extrapolating this a little bit further, if not just from channel texts such as, for example, in modern culture, some of our examples of channel texts are Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh, A Course in Miracles, which was published in the 70s and has been taught worldwide for 40 plus years. A Course of Love, which is a little bit like the sequel to A Course in Miracles. Discourse from the Universe. There are many channeled texts in the last, I will say, 200 years or so that have become popular in the last 40 years. And so channeled just really means that this isn't somebody drawing from their own personal wisdom. It feels almost like they received information and they're just dictating it and writing it down. And so taking A Course in Miracles as an example, that book was written by a psychotherapist. And there were many things that she had written in that book that went against the science of psychotherapy as she knew it. But because she was like, this is some wisdom that I have not previously had access to, let me just at least document it. She was able to collate all of that into the text that we now know as A Course in Miracles. And so I have had experiences. You tell me if you've had experiences like this. Put a 1 in the chat if you've had experiences like what I'm about to describe. Particularly when I'm fasting, I have had experiences where it feels as though everything that comes out of my mouth is scripture. It feels as though I'm speaking something that doesn't come from my conscious knowledge or wisdom. It comes from my access to knowledge and wisdom. And then it just feels like I'm vocalizing whatever that inarticulable wisdom is, but it's not necessarily quote unquote mine from the ego space, from the conscious space. Have you ever had an experience like that? Or maybe you're in the middle of a conversation with a friend and you're giving them encouragement, or you're challenging them, or you're holding them accountable, or you're having some kind of deep conversation. And you say something and they're like, who was that? Because it doesn't even sound like your diction, but it's like, oh, that was a tweetable. You better put that down and post it somewhere because that was good. And so sometimes we have flashes of that, right? That it's like, wow, I do have access to universal wisdom, or I do have access to, and so that can feel like an experience of channeling a little bit, but we haven't developed or haven't remembered, I should say, in recent years, in the last 100 or so years, we haven't remembered how to make that part of our common communication with the divine, right? It's very popular to assume that the divine is somewhere out there, and therefore you have to go to a building to have access to the divine, or you have to go to an authority figure to have access to the divine, or you have to go to somebody else's books for access to the divine. It's not very popular. In fact, it's considered almost blasphemous or arrogant to think that you, little old you, would have access to the divine, and that what you have to say is somehow holy, or whatever the case may be, right? But yeah, that makes sense in common lore. But if we have it as though we are all authors and co-creators of our own experience, and that we all have equal access to the divine, then it makes perfect sense that somebody that you just met off the street, a perfect stranger, could have a particular insight for you that you may not have otherwise have gotten, that you can't or haven't gotten from family or friends or loved ones, right? Because, as they say, God is no respecter of persons. So I want to talk to you about whether you've had these experiences, or whether you've witnessed them, or whether you are curious about them, or you think they're blasphemous. Like, where are we at? Where are we at, family, with this? Have you had that? First, let me ask you the first question. The first question is, have you had experiences like that? Tara says, it's rare, but I have experienced it. Right? You've had experiences where you receive a particular information, you're like, I don't know where this is coming from, and I don't know who needs this. There's a lot of social media posts that says, I don't know who needs to hear this, but blah, blah, blah. You need to hear it. And you know how I know? Because it came to you, right? In order for the words to come out of your mouth, you have to hear them first. So it came first for you. It's your wisdom. All right. So have you had that experience besides Tara and me, where you felt like you were channeling, or you were like downloading some important divine information, either for yourself or for those around you? put a one in the chat if you have. Or if you want to raise your hand and share, I would love that too. I see some ones. That's awesome. Florence says, yeah, she's had lots of downloads. Awesome. Do you write them down, Florence? Do you communicate them in some way? What do you do with those? I wonder. And then the second question, I guess, as a corollary to that one, is when you receive inspiration or downloads, as they were, do you doubt them? Do you check? What do you check them on? You know what I mean? Like, how do you know? How do you know that it wasn't just a random thought? How do you check yourself before you wreck yourself, right? As we say here in the Daily Huddle. I'll tell you what I do when I receive some level of information. For example, sometimes I've gotten warnings in dreams, and it's particularly when it's a weird thing, when it's a weird symbol that I don't recognize. That gives me an idea that this is something for me to check. For example, there was a time, I want to say, not this past Christmas, but the Christmas before, December 2022, where I had a dream that I was talking to my husband and my teeth started falling out. Like just as I was talking, I was like spitting teeth. And I was like, what is going on? Like I couldn't control it. I couldn't stop it. I was embarrassed. I felt ugly. I felt like, something was falling apart and I had no control over it. And it's like, what? I was losing my mind. I woke up and I was like, that was weird. First, because I've already had some dental work and I'm pretty proud of the dental work I've already done. So this is, what do teeth mean, Lord? And I started Googling, dream interpretations about teeth and stuff like that. And come to find out, teeth falling out in dreams is like some kind of like tower moment or, a big thing of your big part of your life falling apart, such that you feel like your image may be compromised. Like it would if your teeth were falling out, you'd feel like you don't look as good, right? And so I started looking at that, and lo and behold, about 2 months after that dream, something happened in my marriage where I was like, what? And we've been recovering ever since. And so to me, that was like, instead of feeling terrified about what was happening, I felt comforted that I got a heads up and that I paused enough to check it, to be like, what does that mean? Because I've never seen that before. That has to be a special message because I have a very particular order request with the divine. I tend to be a little stubborn. I don't know if you picked that up. I tend to be a little stubborn. I tend to be a little, I miss cues sometimes. Like people who are passive aggressive communicators, I miss it all the time. They get really frustrated with me because I'm like, oh, why couldn't you just use your big words? Like hints? I don't. If you don't want to say it directly, I don't want to hear it directly. So we're good. And so I have a very special arrangement and order and request with the universe, with God, that says, God, if you want me to know something, you got to put it in my face. Like I can't miss it. Get it to me however you can. Like use repetition if you have to. Use like the most weird, out of place, that I would never expect wisdom to come from that person type, like that kind of obvious, like that's just way out of space in my life. And so when I saw that dream, I was like, pay attention, because that shit's weird. Go look it up, go see what that means. And sure enough, it was a thing for me. Laura says dreams about teeth meant problems for ahead for me. Yeah, see, exactly. And here's the thing that I'm so fascinated about this is that one of the things that I appreciate about Carl Jung, when he's done some work in dream interpretation, is that he says that there are symbols that cross cultures, cross generations, cross any level of separation, boundaries, and labels that we might use for ourselves. They're just universal symbols. And I just thought that was fascinating because it speaks to the collective unconscious, quite literally. So I pay attention to that. Florence says, I have what I call conversations about questions that I ask God. Oh, great. And how do you get answers, Florence? Let's compare notes. Let's do a best practices call here in Thursday Spiritual Matters. how do you ask those questions, and how do you know you've gotten an answer? What shows up for you? For me, it's like an obvious out of space symbol thing. I was like, okay, I have to pay attention. What about for you? Who has Florence? Is she there? Or anybody else who wants to contribute to that conversation?
She typed in that she's not feeling well and she can't talk. There's a
Oh, got it. Okay. I feel the answer. Oh, you know what? I'm glad that you said that, Robin, because that reminds me there are some people who see the answer. Those are clairvoyants. That hear the answer. Those are clairaudience, right? And so feeling the answer, that feels like clairsentient. And then there's sometimes, have you ever had the experience where you're like, I don't know how I know this, I just know. Those are called claircognizance. And I think I'm one of those. Laura, you have your hand up?
Yes, greetings. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Yes, I think I'm clairvoyant. Might be a little off all of them, but from I was 6 years old, I I did. My first experience was when my father died. The night I dreamt that someone hit me in my head and I was screaming. Then someone woke me up during the dream to tell me that my father is dead.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, what is this? But as a child, I didn't pay much attention. So I woke up from the dream to reality, screaming, crying. They took me to his home, swung. It was my brother and my brother lived with them. I didn't. Swung us over the body and I'm kicking and screaming like, am I going to die too? Or just didn't know what was happening, but it kept me curious over the years to figure out what really happened. I wanted to know. I mean, now I understand, how little about thoughts and vibration and frequency. But since I've noticed in my dreams or downloads, what I look out for is sometimes I see something happen and then I'm like, but I had that dream or I had that download. One morning I was sitting downloading a brother coming to my home to teach me art therapy. He's an artist. And I'm preparing a herbal bath for him. And I'm on the phone talking to him. This is just downloading. Asking him, what would you like to eat when you get here? And I'm preparing the meal for him. And I'm doing all of this stuff. But I'm awake. I'm sitting at my desk waiting to start work. And he came to the bar, ate the meal. Then he left. 2 weeks after he had an accident, he broke his ankle. And after the download, I called a friend and I was there. What's this? What just happened? And she said to me, oh, you're probably having like sexual thoughts. I said, no. That didn't even come in. She was laughing that I might be attracted to him. But then when I heard that he broke his ankle, I said, oh my gosh, that was how the herbal bath, the download. But these things I don't tell to people because people might think I'm crazy. So I keep them to myself. I'm complete.
I understand. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Sorry, thank you, Laura. And everyone, I'm gonna try. I have had many, like I would call them, quite a few downloads, because like I was reading the Bible once, and I asked God, and like, you said not to steal. What kind of thing is this that I'm reading? How could you say this and that and whatever? And then I actually am walking down the street, and then there is this whole conversation in my head. You remember when you asked that question. This is the answer. I was not telling them to steal. I was telling them to take back what belonged to them and all of this. And this happens. I cannot tell you the time, but these conversations happen. I have had where I could not, someone made me so angry that I wanted to, I mean, actually, I had feelings of harming that person. And then I prayed that I should not, please take this anger from me. And I have this conversation where this situation where I was pushed from behind. There's no one behind me. And the voice said, looking forward to those things that are ahead. I leave the certain things behind and I push forward. And it happens all the time. I was warned about COVID, to be still, and it took away all the anxiety that I'd suffered from since I was a child. So 2020 was the best year for me. These conversations I have all the time and downloads.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I appreciate your contribution. Cece, you have something?
Thank you so much. What I'm learning from this is that your personal encounters with God, it is like a spiritual experience that I've experienced a lot of times in life. When I was young, I didn't understand, but now it has become much clearer to me, and I'm grateful for those downloads that God prepares me for whatever it is in advance. And I'm grateful that He would even communicate with me on that level, that I would understand Him and grow in my spiritual development and growth and learn more each day. So this gives me an opportunity to give thanks to God for all the messages that He does download for me. And thank you so much for the topic.
Yeah. Oh, good stuff. Yes, my darling. Come on up.
My sister Queen, Dr. Ogando, thank you so much for the topic. It's something took me back to my childhood. My sisters, every time I wake up, I never dream nothing, but when I dream and I say to my sister, oh, I dreamt, he said, come, let me hear your dream, because they was so scared of my dream that I remember one time I wake up in the morning, we was going to a picnic and we have to take the bus. And I was crying, waking up out of my dream. And I said, Mom, grandma's house burned down. She says, what? I said, yes, in my dream, my grandmother's house was burning down. And she said, oh, come on, girl, stop, girl. Let's go, get ready. So we got ready. And as she said, if your grandmother's house was burned down, they would have called me already. They would have come to my door already. Everything, she started to make the examples. Trust me, guys. One of the things what happened is that the bus that we was on had a fire. So that was the message in my dream. And so when the bus was carrying a fire, my mom said, that's your dream. That's your dream, not your grandmother's house. That was your dream. And next thing that I took away from the presentation this morning is when I fast. I have studied this 14th of February will be my 33rd year of fasting. I do 40 days of fasting. And trust me, guys, I am intouchable. Nobody can touch me when I fast. No one. And I'm telling you, a matter of fact, I'm my own danger when I fast. It's one powerful connection to spirit.
It really is.
That is like, oh my goodness, you feel like nobody can even come close to you because you're radiating this whole big horror that everybody start to back away from you. So thank you so much for the topic. Thank you very much, Dr. Ogando.
Absolutely. Ooh, it's a lot. I didn't know that you did that. Also, I thought I was the only 40-day faster around here. Lauren says, I've been struggling with a topic and walked into a place, church, and the answer comes from someone who does not know me. Yeah, a lot of times this happens, right? That it comes from a random stranger. That's how you know that it's like, okay, see, I couldn't have made that up. I couldn't have engineered that, right? So that you can get your ego out of the way. I love when that happens. Thank you, everybody, for sharing with us. Thank you for your experience, not only with channeled texts, but also just your own channeling, your own download of your own wisdom, because that's really what all that is about. It's about cultivating and exploring your own connection to the divine, and then how you share that with others. Of course, the miracle says that a gift is expanded by sharing it. We don't get to keep it and hoard it. We get to expand it and share it. So again, thank you so much. Remember to love generously, laugh a lot, frequently, loudly. Make sure that you get yourself at least 7 hours of sleep, stress less, eat more plant-based, exercise. Always remember that twerking is a spiritual kundalini raising exercise. And of course, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Always audit your assumptions. We love you. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent job.
Thank you. Thank
Everybody.
you.